Welcome to the Scottish Rite Journal podcast, an audio presentation of the Scottish Rite Journal, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. This week's article is The Masonic Family Man by Brother Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree, and comes from the July-August 2019 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. Many men have taken their first steps towards the altar of Freemasonry after having learned of a particular relative being a member of the craft. Sometimes this happens at a funeral service, when a lodge shows up to perform the last sacred duty. Often it happens when a man comes into possession of a Masonic ring or other heirloom that sets off his curiosity and causes him to dig deeper into his own Masonic heritage, a heritage which had been kept somewhat secret in many families. Yet as Masonry in the United States pushes forward into its next renaissance, men are eager to share appropriate portions of their Masonic journey of self-development with their loved ones. While many of the secrets of Freemasonry remain the meme of the creepy old lodge at the end of the street where the well-heeled men of town gather away from the prying eyes of their families is a vanishing relic. Men and women attending lodge events is commonplace, and the ideals that Freemasons hold dear are shared and valued by the entire family. Brother Dave Martak, 32nd degree, is an extraordinary example of a man whose Masonic journey is taking this shape. Although he has only been a Master Mason for a little more than a year, Dave's interest in his own Masonic lineage has changed his life and his family's life for the better. Hailing from Mount Ararat Lodge number 44 in Bel Air, Maryland, Brother Martak informs us his interest in Masonry came from his maternal grandfather. He had a ring and a cane with Masonic symbols on it. We'd go to the shrine circus growing up. My grandfather had a license plate, but he would never talk about it. I asked him about his cane one time and said, "Do you know what those symbols mean?" And he said yes. I said, "Can you tell me?" He said no. He just would never talk about it. When his grandfather passed away, Brother Dave was so taken with the impressive Masonic funeral service that he was convinced one day he wanted to be a Mason. Yet in those dark ages before Google, and having no living connection to the craft at that time, the idea for Dave to join the lodge was set aside. Dave's interest in becoming a Mason was rekindled when, in 2017, he noticed a friend wearing a Masonic ring. My buddy Lenny had a Masonic ring, and that ring started a conversation about Masonry that is continuing to this day, not only with Lenny, but with all my new brothers. Within a few months, Dave had joined a lodge and continued to explore his Masonic heritage, discovering it to be extensive. Once I became a Master Mason, I contacted the Grand Lodge of Maryland, and they were able to give me information on a lot more of my relatives who were Masons, going back to my maternal great-great-grandfather. With his lineage complete, the Grand Lodge of Maryland helped him create a special jewel to wear, denoting his family history in the craft. While Dave is following in his beloved grandfather's footsteps through Blue Lodge, Scottish Rite, and the Shrine, one aspect that is very different is his desire to share the experience with his family. I believe that it's important for men to go into the lodge room and shut the door and find the harmony that can only be found among brothers. Dave explains, "That is extremely important, but for me, my family being a part of things has been one of the biggest blessings." Brother Martak was raised by the Grand Master of Masons in Maryland in spring of 2018. After the degree work was complete, the Grand Master called off the lodge and opened the door. Dave's wife and son were invited into the lodge and presented him with his Masonic ring. Dave recalls, "They waited on the other side of the building for about 3 hours. My mom, who was living in Nashville at the time, was on the phone on FaceTime so she could be a part of it. When the Grand Master saw and asked who was on the phone, 50 guys in the lodge yelled, 'Hi, Mom!' That was a really special moment because I feel like through me, she is now able to finally share in her father's Masonic journey." As for his family's role in his Masonic pursuits, Brother Martak says it has not ended with a ring presentation. On any given weekend, my wife and I can head out to a nice dinner or an event and know that we are going to be surrounded by good people. My son and I share a bond now through DeMolay that we have never had before. The ritual, the charity work, and self-improvement that come from being in the Masonic family, we have connected in a way that we had never been able to. Dave is now an officer in his Blue Lodge, active in the Scottish Rite Valleys of Susquehanna and Baltimore, and participates in Boomy Shrine, the same shrine as his late grandfather. I was obligated with his fez, Dave declares proudly. He credits his ability to be so active to his wife of 27 years, Chris Martak. I am so lucky to have her, and without her support, I couldn't do any of the things that I do. She encourages my passion and my desire to become a better man and Mason. There is no way I could do any of this if it were not for her. This past May, Dave made his first visit to the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., where he took a tour and had a chance to discuss his story with Grand Commander Ronald A. Seal. I told him all about my experience and how much it means to me and to my family. It was amazing. Here I am, kind of a new guy getting to sit and talk at length with the Grand Commander because we are brothers. When asked to give his thoughts on his Masonic journey, so far Dave says, "I've said this many times. It just keeps getting better. If I am one day blessed with grandkids, I will be proud to tell them about their family history in the fraternity. The secrets of Freemasonry will stay secret, but the benefits of being a part of something so great, how could you not share that with family?" As an added feature to this Scottish Rite Journal podcast, I had the privilege to speak with Brother Dave regarding his article. Hope you enjoy it. So you are quite the active Mason. In the article, you talked about previous family members that you didn't know their history until you became a Mason. Excuse me. How active were your family members that were involved?
The only one I can speak of for sure is my maternal grandfather, and he's the one that I pretty much follow in his footsteps. Both of my grandfathers, both great-grandfathers, and one great-great-grandfather were all Maryland Masons. And I was able to trace that back through the records of the Grand Lodge. I had a wonderful relationship with both of my grandfathers. My paternal grandfather was not active as far as I know, although ironically, he was next door neighbors with the Grand Master of Masons in Maryland. He lived next to one of the Grand Masters of Masonry for years, but he was never very active. But my maternal grandfather was very active without me knowing anything about it. So he wore the rings, he had the license plates, he had the clocks, and all of the memorabilia, which I'm now blessed to have.
Right.
But he never talked about it. But I do know that he was active because he would be at meetings after work, or he was also a very active Shriner. He would take my mother and my father and me and my sister to the Shrine Circus every year. He was one of the ushers. So he was a very active Shriner as well, but we never talked about it. I just knew that he was an active Mason, but we never talked about it. And one story that I like to share is that he had a surgery that required him to use a cane after his surgery. I believe it was a knee surgery. And the cane that he was using was a wooden cane with Masonic symbols and emblems carved into it. And I said, "That's a really nice cane, Granddad." I said, "Do you know what all those symbols mean?" And he said, "Yes." And that was the end of the conversation. He didn't expand on it. He left that conversation alone. And I wish that I would have asked a few more questions that may have led to me saying, "Well, how can I be a Mason?" Because
Right.
I would have loved to have the opportunity to have been active with him.
Sure.
I didn't realize I wanted to be a Mason until his memorial service, when my grandfather passed away, and we had a Masonic memorial service for him. And when I saw those brothers walk in and memorialize my grandfather, I knew at that moment I wanted to be a Mason. It still took me 6 years to act on it, but it's the best thing that's happened. Outside of my family, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
You made mention it wasn't until a funeral that you finally made the decision. And I think about when the enormous memorial service that was had for Brother Pete Hicks. And, that made me wish I had joined sooner.
That was amazing. The amount of love for Brother Hicks, that's the largest one I've seen. I haven't been a Mason for a very, very long time, but that's as big as I've seen. And many of our brothers have said the same. but it's the last great thing that we can do for a brother.
Yeah.
And it meant so much to me that these men came out for my grandfather, and a good chance they didn't even know him because my grandfather wasn't active for the last parts of his life, but they came out for him, and that made a lasting impression. And then I finally joined, and I've never looked back, and I only wish that I would have joined sooner like you did.
Yeah. So I've been privileged to have met your mom, who's spoken about in the article. Bit of a music fan. What was her reaction to all this deep family involvement in the craft?
I know she's very proud, and my aunt as well, my mom's sister, are both very proud that I've carried on this passion for Masonry. They loved their father as much as I loved him. He was truly a good man in every sense of the word. Both of my grandfathers are role models of mine, and their moral fabric is just so strong. And some of that's through their spiritual beliefs, but I don't think there's a mistake that both of them being Masons both have a moral fabric that I've tried to follow along in.
Yeah.
So my father as well is very proud. As a matter of fact, he just called me just last night to tell me that he was proud of my activity within Masonry. And it's not something we talk about very much, but that call just happened yesterday. But as far as my mom, she has such a special part of my journey because she was able to present me with my son, my ring, the night that I was raised, only she was in Tennessee when it happened and I was in Maryland. But that's because my wife FaceTimed her,
right?
And they put the lodge at ease, and my wife came in with my son to present me my ring, and my wife didn't realize she was going to walk into the lodge and kept the FaceTime on. And I was actually raised by the Grand Line, and Grand Master of Warbilist said, "Who's on the phone?" And my heart sunk because I was like, "Oh man, the phone's on." And she said, "That's Dave's mom." And 50 guys in unison said, "Hi, Mom."
That's awesome.
So she's always going to have a special part of my journey, but she's very proud to know that I'm following in her father's footsteps.
And speaking of being proud, congratulations on your red cap.
Oh, thank you. That's a very humbling honor, and I can't even put words together to express how honored I am. But to know that honor came from my peers means more than I could ever formulate.
I know the eligibility requirements. As far as I'm concerned, it should have happened the day after you got your black cap, but I know you got to earn it.
Yeah, and it's just like I said, to know the respect that I have for the men who honored me with that cap is very touching. Because they thought something in me, and I hope that they know what I think of them.
Well, and speaking of earning it, and this isn't mentioned in the article, this is something one would have to experience. You are an exceptional ritualist, especially in Blue Lodge, because you and I are members of the same Blue Lodge, and I see you more there than anywhere. But you truly are. And it's not just a matter of, oh, he's got it memorized. Dave's got it memorized. There's emotion, there's inflection, there's all the things to keep somebody glued just by listening, even if the first time out, especially, dependent upon the degree and that you're working in, it's like Brother Maynard always says, it's like, what is it? Taking a drink of water out of a fire hose. Was that the expression?
That's his phrase.
Yeah. So what is your advice for those looking to improve their skills in ritual work?
Don't wait until practice to practice. In order for ritual to be good, it takes hours and hours and weeks and months. And I'm not a fast learner. I'm a long learner. So once I finally get it, it's mostly going to stick. One of the jokes I like to say is, well, it was perfect in the shower, or it was perfect on the car ride here.
Right.
But, I'm always thinking of some form of ritual and trying to practice it in the car, practice it at home, sitting in my study or wherever, always trying to practice when I have time. And you just mentioned it about memorizing, and work on it, not until you've memorized it, but until you know it. Because my experience has been, my nerves can affect what I've memorized, but my nerves don't affect me as much if I know it. If I truly know it, I'm able to get through it. So if I need a prompt or if I get stuck, it's right there. I can recall it right away. But if I've only worked on it for a brief amount of time, my memory can be affected by my nerves. So work on it until you know it, not just memorize it. That practice, and work till you know it.
Well, then you have nerves of steel, because I can probably count the amount of times on one hand I've seen you work, and yeah.
If you knew how I felt my heart beating through my chest and my breathing laboring and my knees knocking, I'm as nervous of a man up there as you've ever seen. I'm glad it doesn't show.
Well, that's the point. It doesn't show.
but I'll also say this: we are blessed with great ritualists at Mount Ararat Lodge. It's a tradition that I'm following. Yeah. Because we've been blessed with really great ritualists. But if you really want to see great ritual, travel to other lodges, because we are good. And Mount Ararat's got great ritualists, but our state we have some tremendous ritualists. And I learn just by going to the summer schools of instruction and hearing different officers from different lodges and learning from their cadence or their inflection, how they choose to deliver it, and taking a piece from everybody that you hear. You can learn whether it was good or bad, but you can learn. But there are some tremendous ritualists in the state, all around, but from my experiences in the state of Maryland. And if I named them all, I would only be embarrassed that I forgot to name some. But I try to learn from each one of them.
You certainly would know more than I do. That's for sure.
Well, I've been fortunate to have a family that lets me travel as much as I do and spend as much time doing this as I do. And I tell you, man, when you make the best friends that you've ever had in life, it makes it easy to want to travel, because that's where they're going to be.
Well, yeah, and you talk about your family being very much behind you in it, and how active you are. So, as active as a Mason as you are, what keeps you motivated? Is it books? Is it moments of brotherhood? Is it charitable work? All the above.
It's actually a great question, because as with anything, your motivations can go up and down. Your passions, depending on where you're at in life or what's going on in your life. I do read. I try to educate myself, but I really get the best educations from just the conversations that I have with my brothers. I love ritual, and I love the meetings, and I love, how every part of it. But when the gavel drops is when I've had some of my best education from conversations that I've had, or maybe it's just going out to dinner with a couple of friends and just talking about what we think about a perfect emblem or a symbol or a part of the ritual. You and I are both admirers and consider a mentor to be Bob Lalonic. I mean, like I said, I could mention 500 names, but one example is when I was a brand new Mason, and he started talking about his interpretation of chalk, and he gave me his interpretation, and I was blown away by it. And I said, man, I would really love to continue this. And this was right after the meeting. And I said, I would really love to continue this conversation. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, what are you doing when we leave? And we went out to a restaurant, and that conversation hasn't stopped yet. That conversation in many different facets still goes on. So I had the honor of being able to sit in the East and confer the first degree a few weeks ago, because I'm the junior warden, but I chaired up. Yep. And when I got to the part of the lecture that referenced chalk, I looked right at Bob. And there are pieces of every lecture that I could probably look at a different brother and say, I learned about this from you, or I learned about this from you. And so that's what keeps me active, is the passion of the relationships that I've developed in Masonry. I would never want them to be less than what they are. So knowing that I'm going to be in a room with the best friends that I've ever made is really what keeps my passion as strong as it is.
Talking about special moments, as an officer in the lodge who's just 2 seats away from the East, which I'm looking forward to, What moments in the lodge stand out to you, or in any of the seats that you've been in, since you became part of the line?
Anything that has to do with a family connection, and not mine, but whenever someone's son or someone's father or brother comes in to our fraternity, it really hits me in a different way, and it's really special.
Not to interrupt you, we've had a lot of that lately.
We've had a lot of that lately, and it's been wonderful to watch brothers and sons and fathers. And sitting junior warden, I would be the one to obligate a brother, and one of our junior deacon came up to me and said, would you mind, and it wasn't even my call, it was our worshipful masters, but just out of respect, he came to me and said, would you mind if I sat as junior warden to obligate my father? And I said, mind? I can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
And that was a special moment. And when our senior deacon's father came into lodge, and our musician's brother, I mean, it's endless, but those are some really, really special moments since I've been an officer. No moment will ever top the night that I was raised, and the Grand Master
for sure
allowed my wife and my son, and via FaceTime my mom. Nothing will ever top that moment. But as far as what I've seen in the chairs, when I had the opportunity to obligate the three young men who were also DeMolay, current active DeMolays, just a few weeks ago, without giving a lot of time to think about, that's on my short list to know that I'm an advisor for DeMolay. They call me Papa D, so I've got a good relationship with them, a fun relationship with them as their advisor, and to be able to obligate those young men, those brothers, is definitely a high point of my journey so far.
Well, speaking of high points of journeys, and to step aside, what size shoe do you wear? Because you had on a pair of boots the last time I saw you that I'm trying to remember. What size shoe?
Size 11.
Size 11? Okay. Your feet are smaller than mine, but I totally set you up, because one of the charitable things requires you to wear high heels. Where on earth do you find a men's size 11 high heel shoes? And
Goodwill.
And explain what it is and why you do that.
Thank you for letting me explain.
Right.
So we are a very active lodge, and we have what we call brotherhood nights, where whenever there's a fifth Tuesday in a month, we try to have a brotherhood night where brothers from all around the region, and it's becoming from around the state, get together and just share brotherhood. We'll have a great meal. We try to include an education in that, but we always include a charity. And one of the local charities is Sark and Anna's House. And they both deal with, and it can be men as well, but mostly women and children who come from unhealthy relationships.
Yeah.
And Sark has a charity event. It's called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. And you walk a mile in the town of Bel Air in a pair of high heels. And you have as many people as you can join you. And that particular time I was a party of one as far as the lodge was concerned, but it's expanded. But I had to go out and find a pair of size 11 high heels, and Goodwill had a pair.
Oh, wow.
But my wife called me out and said, they're not very high. So the day that I got there, they actually had 100 pairs laying around. And I said, okay, I'm going to go big or go home.
Wow.
And the hardest part was being a big guy with a bit of a belly. I learned that it's not real easy to stand on high heels when the ground is sloped going forward. So it was more of a balancing act than I expected it to be, but it was a lot of fun, and it was for a great charity. And we raised within our lodge $1,200 that particular time. We raised $1,200 this time, and I hope we can continue to have that sort of an impact in our community, whether it be that particular charity or any charity. We want to leave an impact in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you are definitely an impact in our Blue Lodge. And now that you have your red cap, I recently just got my black cap. I'll see you at least one more day out of the week. Yeah. It's like you said, when you're active in Blue Lodge and you're active in Scottish Rite Masonry,
it's going to be more time, more meetings, and it's probably going to be the same faces. But when those same faces, I know I say it a lot, but when those same faces are some of the best men that you've ever known in your life, it's easy to go back. And I know that I said this in a speech when you received your 14th degree ring, and I was asked why I'm an active Mason, and I believe that so many of us are active because when you're young and you live in a neighborhood, your friends are chosen for you depending on where your parents decided to buy a home.
Right.
And your school friends are probably going to be the same reason because of where you resided.
Right.
And that same thought process or theory really follows you all the way through life, because you're going to get a job that not necessarily you didn't necessarily choose the job, but the job chose you, and your friends are going to be who you worked with. So a lot of times your friends are chosen for you because of where you lived or where you worked. But when we become Masons, we all joined a fraternity as like-minded men to be a good man and make ourselves better or make men better. And I really believe that that's why the friends that I've made in Masonry are the best friends that I've ever had.
Like and share this article, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you wish to comment, please leave one, and as a reminder, hit the notifications bell. Any accompanying photographs or citations for this article can be found in the corresponding print edition. The Scottish Rite Journal is published by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. Mark Dreisenstock, 32nd degree, KCCH, Managing Editor. I'm your host, Matt Bowers.